You know what? You've been in the UK with us before covering the Tommy Robinson case. How ironic that literally today he was sent off to prison, a 9-month total jail term. He'll wind up serving about 2.5 of that, while the government of the UK and the government of Canada talk about how much they love media freedom. So ironic.
Yeah, and it's interesting. When I decided months ago that I wanted to cover this conference, it was because I really hoped it would be an introspective look at free speech all around the world, and certainly in the host countries, Canada and the UK. And the one thing that I find interesting here is that we're coming up on the end of day 2, and I don't think I've seen a single example of any introspection from Canada or the UK on this. Lots of talk about things that are happening elsewhere in the world, and very awful things. I mean, journalists in Venezuela and Ghana that are being persecuted, killed, jailed, and I think it's important to stand up against that. But there's nothing controversial about Chrystia Freeland saying we're against journalists getting killed. There's nothing controversial about Jeremy Hunt saying we don't want journalists to be imprisoned. The real hard work is in talking about the shortcomings of your own countries, and there's been none of that.
You're exactly right. But it's worse than that. And you wrote an excellent article at tnc.news, which I would recommend to all our viewers. Tell us about an honored guest. Now, this morning I was at the Tommy trial, so you were holding the fort here with Sheila. Tell me about this, well, your scoop about this Malaysian honored guest.
You know, one of the big themes in all of the speakers here, supposedly, is that they have an ironclad commitment to free speech and free expression. And when I saw that one of the speakers, not just on some panel in conference room Z4, but the plenary session opening the day, really the official closing of the conference, on stage with Jeremy Hunt and Chrystia Freeland, the foreign minister of Britain and the UK, is the communications and multimedia minister for Malaysia. Now, when I saw Malaysia, I was very surprised, pleasantly so, because this is a country that I don't often associate with free speech. And I decided to look a little bit into not just the country's policies, but the policies of the speaker himself, a man who, again, has had this post, and in his time as the Minister of Communications and Multimedia has actually called for censorship and called for the prosecution of publishers. And one notable example of this was that he wanted a publisher of an outlet called Malaysia Today, which is actually published from England, prosecuted. And he said that he wanted, in his words, extraterritorial powers of hate speech legislation so that Malaysia could enforce its censorship around the world.
This sounds like the worst kind of guy, and he's on the stage on the main session as an honored guest.
I really hope there would be questions taken in that session for one reason alone, and that was that Jeremy Hunt held up this man as a pioneer.
That's the Foreign Secretary of the UK.
Yes, and he held up this man, this minister, as really the hero of someone on the front lines of free speech, when this man wanted to prosecute one of Jeremy Hunt's citizens just in September. And it goes further than that. He also, in March, had pushed for a law that would force news outlets to be liable if someone goes and comments on a story in a way that's inflammatory. And you know, I put this question to Chrystia Freeland in a scrum, which is a different story entirely. I know Sheila Gunn-Reid will tell it. And her response was, this isn't a conference of angels.
Well, you know, it's...
I agree with her, by the way. It's not, but whether it should be is a different question.
That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. Every day I do a video monologue, and then I interview an interesting guest, and then I end by reading my hate mail. But you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at therebel.media/shows.